My name is Leah Whitman. I'm 30 years old, born and raised in Greenwich, Connecticut, a town where every house looks like it belongs on the cover of an architecture magazine and every dinner feels like an exam. My family didn't just succeed, they defined what success meant. My father, Gerald Whitman, is a renowned neurosurgeon who once appeared on the cover of Modern Medicine. He operated on a U.S. senator, something my mother never failed to bring up at every party. My mother, Celeste, is a founding partner at a major Manhattan law firm. They called her the Fox in Chanel, cold, razor-sharp, and undefeated in court. My older brother Benjamin was the golden standard, star student at Yale, then Johns Hopkins Medical School. Since he was 10, he had a life plan drawn by my parents and monitored at every step. Every one of Ben's achievements was framed and displayed along the hallway, from photos with headmasters to medical research awards. Whenever guests visited, my mom always led them down the honor wall and proudly declared, "Ben is the product of structure and discipline." And me? I was the second child. The unedited draft of the Whitman family, as they half joked. I never fit their model. I had no interest in stethoscopes or courtrooms. Instead, I was fascinated by the old desktop computer my father once tried to throw out. While Ben practiced virtual surgeries on a brand new iPad, I was typing lines of code on a machine so slow it hissed, trying to bring it back to life. Dinner at our house wasn't a place for uncertainty. After my father detailed a successful surgery and my mother recapped a courtroom win, Ben would share updates from his latest research symposium. When it was my turn, I excitedly mentioned a learning app I was building for students with hearing loss. My mother looked at me coolly. "Leah, don't you think it's time to focus on the LSAT, that coding stuff? Where exactly will that take you?" My father set down his utensils and folded his arms. "You're smart, but smart needs direction. The tools you're tinkering with aren't going to help your future." I bit my lip and swallowed my half-chewed steak. They didn't see me. They only saw a daughter veering off course. I once built a website to help students organize their SAT prep schedules. It got over 5,000 shares in 3 days. When I told my mom, she said, "Well, maybe you can use that as part of your law school application." When I got invited to a summer tech camp at MIT, my dad asked, "Is that even related to medicine?" I learned to stop sharing after that. I built a world of my own in my room, full of computers, wireframes, and lines of code glowing on a dark screen. While Ben was flown across countries for global clinical experiences, I took a part-time job fixing laptops at a small repair shop run by a Sri Lankan man who was the first person to tell me, "You've got the mind of a real engineer." But words like that meant nothing in my house. To them, I was the girl squandering her sky-high SAT score, rejecting a safe future in a white coat or tailored suit, a disappointment with a keyboard, as my mother once called me in a phone call she didn't know I overheard. I wasn't rebellious. I didn't run away. I never failed a major exam, but I did something they couldn't forgive. I chose differently. And in the Whitman household, being different was the greatest sin. When I was 17, I secretly entered the state-level coding competition in Minneapolis. I had taught myself how to build a simple app to help seniors manage their medications, with dosage reminders, interaction checks, and syncing with electronic health records. The idea came after I heard my uncle, a veteran, had a hypertensive episode from mixing up his pills. I coded through countless nights in my best friend's basement, because if my parents found out I was spending time on a childish hobby instead of prepping for the SAT or studying for Harvard Law, they would have locked up every device in the house. I wasn't expecting much, just wanted to see what I could pull off, but my app made it straight to the finals. 3 days later, I got a letter from the Minnesota Health Tech Association. I had won second place, along with an invitation to speak as a teen guest at their annual conference. I remember that day clearly. I walked into the kitchen holding the letter just as my mom was pouring red wine for my dad after work. I held it up like a tiny flag, proving I wasn't lost the way they thought. "Mom, Dad, I have something to share." My dad barely glanced over, not even putting down the Wall Street Journal. My mom gave a polite nod, as if expecting a grade report. I won a coding award, I said. It's an app that helps elderly patients manage their meds. They invited me to speak at next month's conference. No one smiled, no congratulations, not even a raised eyebrow. Where is it? My mom asked, rinsing a glass while looking at me through the stemware. St. Paul, Intercontinental Hotel. She nodded, still washing. So you're planning to miss school for this? I hesitated. It's just 2 weekend days. My computer science teacher wrote me a recommendation. My dad set down his newspaper, looking me in the eye for the first time. Leah, do you really think those little software things can be a real career? Tech changes every day. What you learn today will be obsolete next year. I gripped the letter tighter, but doctors have tested my app. They say it's useful. You're wasting your potential, he said firmly. You should be focused on your Yale admission essay. My mom chimed in, her tone airy but cold. Or you can list the app under extracurriculars. Makes a nice talking point. A talking point. The result of my sleepless nights, learning to code from old forums, crafting every line with pure passion, reduced to a bullet item in an application. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. But that night, I typed one question into Google. Can you study computer science without parental consent? Senior year, I secretly applied to the University of Minnesota Computer Science, alongside the applications my parents demanded for Harvard, Columbia, and Princeton. I used a separate email, got a recommendation from my tech teacher, and submitted it on the final deadline. 3 months later, I got my acceptance letter with a full scholarship. I tucked it inside my Python programming book and locked it in a drawer. I didn't tell anyone, not out of shame, but because silence sometimes is the only way to protect a dream not yet strong enough to withstand contempt. That same month, my mom scheduled a private college counselor session. When she asked for my transcript and extracurricular list, I handed her a faded printout of my app. She looked at it for 10 seconds, then set it on the table. Leah, she said, someday you'll thank me for not letting you waste your life on some 2-bit startup nonsense. I smiled, not because I agreed, but because I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to beg them to believe in me. I wasn't going to rewrite my dream to fit their template. I'd do it my way, even if I had to walk that path alone. I moved to Minneapolis on an autumn afternoon just as the leaves began to change, carrying 2 suitcases, an old laptop, and a quiet promise to myself. I would start over, on my own terms. At the University of Minnesota, for the first time, I felt like not everyone judged me by my last name or what they thought I was supposed to become. In my intro to programming class, I sat next to a girl with short brown hair who wore her headphones even while the professor was speaking. Her name was Riley, a biochem major turned coder, blunt to the point of brutal, and the proud owner of an eccentric hoodie collection. One night, as we stayed up until 3 a.m. debugging a group project, Riley stared at the interface I was designing and asked, "Did you study UX before?" "Self-taught," I said. "Yeah, well, it looks like something built at a startup." I smiled but said nothing. From that moment, Riley became the only person I shared sketches of an idea I'd been quietly working on before transferring, a platform to connect chronic patients with care coordinators in real time. Simple, secure, and built in a way that didn't make users feel like they were filing taxes. "Do you think it's viable?" I asked. Riley leaned back in her chair, chewing gum, then nodded. "If you pull this off, it's not an app, it's a movement." From that week on, we met every Friday afternoon at the Carlson Library, armed with black coffee and free cookies. Riley handled the back end. I worked on the interface, security, and connection logic, all in silence. We didn't post online, didn't mention it to classmates, and definitely didn't tell anyone from home. Especially not my parents. Riley had an aunt who was a hospital care coordinator. Through her, we gained access to internal documentation about post-discharge workflows. The deeper we went, the more chaos we uncovered. Some places still used fax machines. Some patients waited 3 weeks just to switch medications because 2 doctors used incompatible software. We called the project Bridge Care, a care bridge. The name came from my own experience with my uncle, who nearly died from mixing 2 medications that should never be taken together. At first, Bridge Care was just a Figma file and a few test lines of code. But by winter break of sophomore year, we had a working interactive demo. Riley said, "If we're serious, we should file for a test license. I've got a contact at North Point Innovation Hub." That hub sat inside a low-rise office park on the edge of Bloomington, where scrappy young people brought their dreams and deadlines to survive another quarter. We rented a literal corner of a table next to the bathroom and emergency exit for $85 a month. Not glamorous, but just enough space to prop up an old monitor and connect to free Wi-Fi. Every evening after class, I biked there with my laptop, my head full of ideas and my eyes heavy with exhaustion. But not once did I feel like I was wasting my time. One night, Riley showed me an email reply from a trial nursing center in Rochester. Simple, intuitive interface. Real potential for real-world use. If stable prototype is available, willing to pilot with 30 patients for 3 months. We stared at each other, speechless. Then, the only sound in the room was a soft click. Me hitting send on our first ever contract. The day I officially registered Bridge Care LLC, I didn't tell anyone, not out of fear anymore, but because I'd grown used to celebrating pivotal moments in silence. No fireworks, no champagne, just a gentle glow on the screen, registration successful, and the sense that this time I had taken a step I couldn't walk back from. I was only 20. My bank account was practically empty. But I had an idea taking shape. A co-founder I trusted and a stubborn belief that if I held on long enough, the world would have no choice but to listen, even if they didn't carry the Whitman name. Even if they once said tech was just a toy. I never told my parents about Bridge Care. Not because I feared they'd object. I was used to that, but because I knew they'd reshape everything to fit the narrative they always told. That if I succeeded, it was because they had given me space to explore. And if I failed, it would be proof I hadn't listened. In their minds, every outcome would belong to them. I wasn't about to let them take credit for something I had built, quietly, deliberately, over 3 years. By my junior year, Bridge Care secured its first angel investment, $220,000, from a regional health fund based in St. Paul. Its representative, Mr. Harris, had a daughter who suffered complications due to communication errors between 2 doctors from different hospitals. He didn't ask about my age or whether I had an MBA. He looked at our prototype, the medication error reduction data, and the feedback from the pilot nursing teams. "This isn't an app," he said slowly. "It's something I wish had existed 10 years ago." We used the funding to hire 2 developers, Devante and Clara, both seniors, both talented enough to make me review my own code after every team meeting. Riley handled the back end. I led product direction and client communication. Not because I was the best speaker, but because I was the only one who could keep a steady tone on late-night calls with hospital executives. I still lived in the same run-down student apartment in Marcy Holmes, where the kitchen leaked gas and the heater groaned like a ghost every time it snowed. I drove the same 2006 Corolla my dad once planned to junk, but I asked to keep it. It rattled every time I started it like it had the flu. But it ran, and more importantly, it didn't attract attention. I dressed plainly, wore no smartwatches, carried no designer bags, even though our company had over $1 million in operating capital. Because once a year, at Thanksgiving, I still returned to the Whitman home, and I needed my parents to keep believing I was temporarily struggling in IT. That year, my mom seated me next to Aunt Margot, the one who always asked, "So, when are you going back to law school?" My dad asked just one question over dinner. "Leah, would you like Jason to refer you for something at Mayo Clinic? They're short on IT support staff." Jason, my brother, was now chief of neurology at Rochester. Every time I came home, he'd talk about his standout patients, the research he was leading, and the board meetings he chaired. I wasn't jealous, I just found it amusing that my family discussed hospital systems without realizing that the platform I built was silently running behind nearly half the patient rooms. I remember the March afternoon clearly, the one when I received an email from the Cleveland Medical Network. Bridge Care is currently reducing patient data processing times by an average of 48%. The board is considering system-wide integration. I stood in front of the photocopier at our co-working space, ink-stained fingers trembling as my heart raced like I'd just hit the lottery. That system had over 40 facilities across the Midwest. I wanted to call someone, but I didn't call home. I called Riley. Guess what? Already saw it, she exhaled. Just read the email. I don't know whether to cry or order pizza. We did both. Still, my parents had no idea. I kept Bridge Care out of any press that used my photo, listed myself as Leah W. in articles and investor releases. On LinkedIn, I wrote, IT Consultant, Midwest Health Systems. Not a lie, but vague enough not to raise suspicion. I didn't do it to play hide and seek. I did it because I needed a pure space, a space untouched by their spin, where Bridgecare wouldn't be turned into another success born from parental vision. I needed it to be mine before anyone else touched it, especially someone who only understood that my last name was Whitman. And then, one day, my mother's name lit up my phone just as I was signing a contract with the Iowa State Health Network, valued at $2.8 million. I didn't answer. I stared at the blinking screen and smiled faintly. I knew she was probably calling about Jason's engagement, likely inviting me to some overpriced restaurant where I'd once again sit through stories of her firstborn's greatness while sipping water and fielding questions like, "So, have you applied to grad school yet?" That evening, I wore a deep blue silk dress, simple, modest, tailored to precision. My mother probably wouldn't recognize it as a custom piece from a small San Francisco label, funded by Bridgecare through a private investment round. I didn't wear it to stand out. I wore it to look exactly like what I had become: composed, self-assured, and no longer in need of proving anything to anyone. Jason's engagement party was held at the Marlowe, the most luxurious restaurant in River North, the kind with a 3-month wait list and personalized menus for each guest. It was exactly the sort of thing my parents loved: elegant, overscripted, and designed for maximum praise aimed at Jason, the heir apparent. I arrived on time, not early, not late. Crystal glasses were already arranged, lights glinting off rows of satin-covered chairs, and, in the scent of fresh lilies, my mother approached with a tight smile. "Leah, I'm glad you managed to find something appropriate." I nodded, offering no reaction. Just minutes later, Jason appeared, slinging an arm over my shoulder. "Really glad you came," he said. "Sophia's been wanting to meet you." That name made me pause. Sophia? The fiancée we'd heard about endlessly for months, as if she were the final confirmation of Jason's flawless trajectory. I'd never met her, but I'd heard enough. She worked in health tech, was brilliant, and, according to my mother, knew how to talk to grown-ups. Jason led me to a woman in an ivory suit, her brown hair pinned high, her eyes bright and confident. She turned, extended a hand. "Leah? So nice to finally meet you. Jason talks about you all the time." I shook her hand with a polite smile. "I've heard plenty about you, too." As I began to release her hand, she narrowed her eyes slightly, holding on a beat longer than standard courtesy. She studied me longer than she should have, as if piecing together two images in her mind. "Sorry, but your last name is Whitman, right?" Jason laughed. "Of course, she's my sister." Sophia paused a second, then blurted out, almost involuntarily, "Wait, are you Leah Whitman from Bridgecare?" The atmosphere around us dipped an octave. Jason's wine glass trembled slightly. My mother, standing a few steps away, looked up from her conversation and began walking over. I kept my smile. "Yes, I'm Leah Whitman, co-founder and CEO of Bridgecare." Sophia blinked, mouth slightly open, and turned to Jason. "Did you know? Leah's company is currently one of the top acquisition targets on our strategic roadmap. I reviewed their pitch deck 2 weeks ago. That product is the new gold standard for care coordination solutions." Jason stood frozen. My mother had reached us now, her expression shifting from curiosity to stunned disbelief. Leia, she said cautiously, what are you doing with that? My organization has been implemented in 7 major hospital systems nationwide, I replied, my voice as steady as if reading a budget report. And it's currently being evaluated by Sophia's firm for acquisition at a valuation north of $190 million. No one said anything for 3 solid seconds. I heard a knife drop onto fine china at a nearby table. Sophia broke the silence. I guess now you know why your face looked familiar. Your company is one of Horizon's top 3 targets this quarter. We thought Leah was an abbreviation for someone else. My mother blinked. You founded a company? A real tech company? I turned to her. Yes, since sophomore year of college. Initial funding was $220,000, and we're currently active in 3 states. But I suppose you were all too busy to notice. Jason took a step back, looking at me like he was seeing me for the very first time. Gone was the big brother knows best expression. In its place, raw disbelief. You never said anything, because every time I did, no one listened, or tried to rewrite it into what the family thought was acceptable. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just told the truth. Clean, clear, and dropped it squarely into the room where they'd spent years miscasting me as the wayward daughter needing direction. After a long pause, Sophia slowly nodded. You have time to talk privately sometime? If you're open to it, your brother might need to get used to having a CEO at the table. I smiled. I'm always open to talking, but this time I'd like to send the terms. The air in the room felt vacuumed out after my response. Every gaze in the engagement hall locked onto me at once. The forgettable, stubborn little sister, the one the family always described with the same familiar line, "She's still tinkering with some tech stuff." Now I stood there, saying nothing more, not holding up spreadsheets or asking anyone to vouch for me, because Sophia, someone entirely outside this family, had already confirmed everything. A CEO. The one negotiating a nearly $200 million deal. The same girl my mother once suggested should apply for an IT support job at the hospital. My father broke the silence first. You kept all this secret for how long? He stammered, his wine glass trembling slightly. Since I got our first round of funding. 3 years ago, I said. My mother clutched my sleeve, just a little too tightly. Why didn't you tell us? If you needed legal guidance, I could... I gently pulled my arm away. I have a venture counsel team. And if you check Forbes, Tech Rising from last month, you'll see their lead analyst said the same thing. Jason stood frozen, as if mentally scanning every memory of me, trying to match them with the woman standing before him. You really didn't need anything from us? I looked at him, my tone softer. I just needed you to believe in me, but since no one did, I had to learn to believe in myself. And then it started, the part I'd always expected. Aunt Cynthia, the same woman who once called me an unemployed coder at Christmas dinner, appeared next to me, holding a glass of white wine. Leah, sweetheart, I truly admire what you're doing. Health tech is the future. I've invested in a few funds myself if you ever need additional backing. I gave a small smile but didn't reply. Uncle Jerry, the one who declined to attend my first demo day in St. Paul because he wouldn't waste a Sunday morning on startup nonsense, leaned toward me and whispered, "So what's your company's current valuation? I mean, if there's room for a small stake." The mood in the room shifted. Gone was the condescension, replaced by a scramble for proximity. With just one sentence from Sophia, I had transformed from a smudge on the Whitman family tree to a golden investment opportunity. My mother stepped back, whispering to Cousin Anne just loudly enough for me to hear. She always had a knack for this stuff. Remember when she took apart the printer just to fix a paper jam? We knew she had potential. I glanced at Sophia. She raised an eyebrow slightly. She understood the look. That moment when family flattery isn't about remorse, but about angling for a piece of what they once dismissed. The party continued, congratulations flowed like a broken dam. Every relative found a reason to approach me. One offered coffee, another promised introductions to banking contacts. and yet another asked if their child could intern on my development team. Jason poured more wine and stepped closer. I don't even know what to say, he exhaled. Maybe I believed what Mom and Dad said about you for too long. I wasn't bitter. I didn't want apologies. I just told the truth. I don't need them to understand everything. I just need them to stop defining failure by their own standards. He nodded. Sophia thinks the world of you, and I do too, even if it took me too long. As we were leaving, my mother stopped me in the lobby. Leah, we need to talk soon. I want to really understand what it is you do. I looked at her, not unkindly, just clearly. So do I, Mom, but only if you're coming to listen, not to suggest what path I should try next. She didn't answer, but her hand faltered as it reached for her phone. That night, back at my apartment, I opened my laptop and found an email from Horizon. They had updated their offer, raising the valuation to $208 million and requesting a closed-door meeting the following Monday. At the bottom, Sophia had written one line. Looks like some folks are going to need to practice saying CEO Whitman correctly. 3 days after the engagement party, I received an email from my mother. No greeting, no polite subject line, just a single sentence. Saturday, 10 a.m., home. Your father will be there, don't be late. I sat in my office on the 18th floor, sunlight spilling through the windows overlooking the Mississippi River. I hovered my mouse over the message, but didn't open it again. I already knew this wasn't an invitation to breakfast. It was an emergency board meeting, convened by the very people who once insisted I needed direction, now forced to face the fact that the daughter they dismissed as a genetic detour was sitting on top of something they could no longer comprehend. I arrived on time. The white-paneled house in Edina hadn't changed. The neatly trimmed front lawn, the hallway lined with Jason's framed awards. The faint smell of cinnamon waffles drifted from the kitchen, but no one offered me any. My father was seated at the head of the dining table, starched shirt buttoned to the collar like this was a shareholders' meeting. My mother held a stack of papers, not legal contracts, but printed articles from the internet about bridge care. Leah, my father began, your mother and I feel shut out. We're a family. You should have given me permission before I succeeded, I cut in. My voice was calm, but my gaze didn't flinch. My mother set the papers down, her lips pressed tight. Did it ever occur to you that we worry about you? That this was reckless? No business degree, no network. Why didn't you share? Ask for help? I nodded slowly, took a breath. Because every time I shared, you rewrote the story. I'd talk about programming, you changed the subject to law school. I'd mention an app, Dad would say Jason needed an IT assistant. I showed a financial roadmap, you asked why I wasn't applying to Yale. My entire adolescence was a courtroom, and my dreams were the exhibit you kept objecting to. My father turned his face away. I looked directly at him. You once said tech was a toy, that if I didn't become a doctor or a lawyer, I'd be a failure. But the very software you dismissed is now in use at over 200 hospitals to prevent medication errors. It's saving lives, just like your work. My mother remained silent. No rebuttal, no interjection. A rare signal. Either she was thinking or just lost her grip on control. I didn't tell you, I continued, because I needed to know if I could stand on my own without hearing every day that I was wasting my potential. I didn't want success as something you allowed. I needed to know I was strong enough to create something for myself. My father nodded slowly, as if each word was a hammer against 30 years of hard-set belief. My mother finally spoke, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. You had a right to be angry. I didn't realize I was turning love into pressure. I met her eyes. Not just pressure, Mom. You and Dad tried to force me into a mold without asking if I could breathe inside it. The room went still. No one touched their coffee, no clink of spoons, no soft background music like most Whitman breakfasts. Do you want us to make it right? My father asked slowly. That depends on how you try, I replied. Not with proud Facebook posts, not by telling your colleagues you always saw it coming, but by actually listening, without correcting. without redefining me through your lens. My mother nodded slightly. Okay, I'll try. I knew that wouldn't be easy. Their whole lives were built on discipline, order, and structure. Everything I had dared to defy, but at least this time they sat there and let me speak. No interruptions, no dismissals, and that, for now, was the only start I needed. That evening, back in my tiny apartment, my phone rang. It was Jason. You were brutally honest, he said, half laughing. I don't think I've ever seen Mom that quiet in a family meeting. Looks like I'm rewriting family history. He paused. I'm sorry, Leah, for believing there was only one right path, for letting you walk it alone for so long. I leaned against the glass window, looking out at the city lights. It's okay, Jason, but next time I take a step forward, don't just watch. Walk with me. 3 months after that conversation with my parents, I sat in the new bridge care office on the 21st floor of the Mill District, a sunlit space with oak floors and floor-to-ceiling windows. On the wall across from my desk hung a large photo, a nurse smiling as she received a timely medication update from our system. That photo wasn't for decoration. It was a reminder that every line of code I had ever written wasn't just for profit, but for real impact. I had never shown that photo to my parents. They had never asked. And I wasn't angry about it. I no longer needed their recognition to understand my worth. The signing ceremony with Horizon happened on a Monday morning. No ribbon cutting, no cameras, just a frosted glass conference room, an open laptop with the documents ready, and the quiet tapping of keys from the attorneys on both sides. Sophia shook my hand last, smiling. I knew you'd never let them rewrite this story the way they wanted, she whispered. And I'm glad. Thanks for never calling me Jason's little sister, I replied. The deal closed at $212 million. Higher than projected. Riley and I retained operational shares and full product control for the next 3 years. I knew that if this had happened 3 years earlier, I might have immediately called my parents to share the news. This time, I didn't. I went to dinner with our engineering team. Devante brought homemade red velvet cake, and Clara uncorked Italian wine. We toasted without speeches, without noise. Just a quiet evening among people who had survived thousands of hours debugging in silence without recognition. I chose to live close to work, a 2-bedroom apartment with windows facing the river. I still drove my old Corolla, even though I could afford 3 Teslas now. Each morning, I brewed coffee by hand instead of using a machine to remind myself that some things aren't meant to be automated, and real value comes from process, not speed. My parents were still trying, in their own way. My mother sent links to articles about successful female founders with notes like, "Thought this might inspire you." My father sent emails with subject lines like, "Old colleague asking about bridge care." I replied selectively, keeping the tone neutral, not distant, but not entirely open either. I wasn't punishing them. I wasn't parading my success to make them feel regret. I was simply living on my terms. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant accepting that they hadn't understood and might never fully understand. But I was okay with that. Jason was different. He stopped by the office monthly, bringing sandwiches from our favorite deli and chatting like an old friend. One day, he asked, "If you could do it all over again, would you choose a different family?" I shook my head. No, because if I hadn't grown up in a house where every dream had to pass cross-examination, maybe, I wouldn't have had the guts to protect that first fragile idea of a system no one believed could work. I didn't need their applause. I just needed to believe in myself. Occasionally, I received emails from first-year students asking for advice. One wrote, "I don't know what to do when my parents say I should choose a more stable major than tech." I replied, "You don't have to convince them. You just have to care enough to stay at your keyboard when the world thinks you're playing." One autumn afternoon, while speaking on my entrepreneurial journey at my old college, I noticed my mother standing in the back. She wasn't wearing a business suit, no designer purse, just standing quietly, arms wrapped around her jacket. After the talk, she walked up. No hug, no tears. She simply said, "You don't need me to say anything, do you?" I nodded. "No, but you being here is enough." That night, I took down the nurse photo from my office wall and replaced it with a new one, our team on the first day in our official office. Riley, me, Devante, Clara, and Kayla, hands still stained with printer ink, eyes bleary from no sleep, all smiling. No one in the picture was blood, but that was the family I chose, and for the first time in my life, I didn't need to explain why. Leia's story proves that true success doesn't require permission from family or anyone else. When dismissed and pressured, she didn't fight loud battles. She built quietly, with skill and passion. And when the truth came out, she didn't ask for apologies. She simply chose to live fully, on her terms. Sometimes the greatest freedom comes not from forgiveness, but from no longer needing approval to know your worth. What do you think about Leah's choices? Was she too firm or exactly right in claiming that freedom? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and life.